A producer was needed, so Maverick came up with a list of suggestions for the band to consider. Eventually, it was decided that Terry Date would produce the Deftones' first album. A highly respected producer, Terry Date has worked with some of the rock world's most illustrious names. His previous clients included Pantera and Soundgarden, and he was the man behind White Zombie's multi-platinum album Astro Creep 2000. Now that a suitable producer had been found, the Deftones could begin work on the album itself. Several of the songs to be included were already written and perfected, since they had been playing them live for a long time. However, in an effort to record the best material that they could, they set about writing a number of new songs, ones that better reflected the current stage of their musical development. Furthermore, Terry Date had some ideas about how the band could improve the structure and arrangements of the songs. It was him who came up with the idea of using a hip-hop DJ on a couple of tracks on the album. Within 3 years, almost every metal band to emerge on the scene would bring their own DJ along. The same DJ would appear on all 3 of the Deftones albums, eventually becoming a permanent member of the band. With an experienced producer at the helm, the band were able to make the most of their material. The hard work shows. Adrenaline, as the album was called, is an incredible first effort. At the first hearing, the music seems to be a simple wall of aggressive noise. But beyond the anger and distorted guitars, the band shows an impressive grasp of melody. Chino's voice on the tracks, such as 7 Words and Litter, swings between low guttural growls and high soaring notes with a practiced ease. As many critics noted, the Deftones didn't easily fit into any existing genre. They weren't another angst-ridden rap metal outfit like Rage Against the Machine, and they didn't sound like industrial acts like Ministry or 9 Inch Nails. Certainly there were elements of industrial or rap in their songs, but the Deftones differed from the majority of their contemporaries in that they were willing to use anything that sounded good. This eclectic attitude would become more and more apparent in their music, having first appeared on Adrenaline. The track Nosebleed, for example, contrasted moments of furious energy with mellow, almost quiet interludes. A single, 7 Words, was released from the album, with an accompanying video that received a reasonable degree of airplay on MTV. Unfortunately, the single was not particularly successful, and it was quickly forgotten. Upon its release, Adrenaline attracted several favourable reviews, although there seemed to be a definite tendency to dismiss the Deftones as just another noisy metal band. Most critics felt it was a competent debut, but nothing special. Metal fans responded well to the album, but any success was mostly overshadowed by the growing fame of their friends Korn, who were becoming more and more popular with the rock press. Even so, Adrenaline managed to sell 200,000 copies by the end of the year, a respectable amount for a debut record. The release of their first major label album meant that the Deftones would now have to embark on a hectic schedule of touring and promotional appearances. Extensive tours were arranged, with the band supporting several high-profile metal acts. All-girl grunge rockers L7 took the Deftones out on a North American tour, which exposed them to the biggest audiences they had seen so far. L7 were riding high on the back of their surprise hit, Pretend We're Dead, and several reviews also pointed out the potential of the support act. Their old Californian friends Korn also managed to help the Deftones out by booking them as the support act for one leg of their debut album tour. But by far the greatest opportunity of those early tours was the chance to support Chino's childhood favourites Bad Brains. One of the most original bands to emerge from the Californian rock scene, Bad Brains had split up some years before, but had recently come together to record their comeback album, If a Monkey Had a Brain. Chino and his friends jumped at the chance to join one of their all-time favourite bands, and their shows together were a great success, allowing the Deftones to reach an audience that would not normally have listened to them. Bad Brains were an older band with a long-standing fan base, while the Deftones were primarily used to playing in front of teenagers. Aside from the joys of playing with some of their favourite bands, there were some very happy developments in the band's personal lives. Chino's first son, Christian, was born, and the band took a break so the singer could enjoy the company of his new son. Meanwhile, Chi's wife had also become pregnant and would later give birth to the bassist's first son, who would be named Gabriel. The Adrenaline tours lasted a total of 13 months, during which time the Deftones played in just about every state in America. They were, of course, entitled to a break after such hard work, but Maverick impressed upon them the importance of following up their recent touring successes. After taking their well-deserved rest, they were back in the studio preparing material for the second album. Their hard work was about to pay off.
I mean, this next record, I don't know. I mean, I like it tons more than the last one, so, I mean, I don't know where it's going to go. I hope, far, but, it's like, I'm already fulfilled, you know what I'm saying?
The sessions for the Deftones' second album would be conducted differently to those for Adrenaline. For a start, there were to be no 18-hour stints, no marathon all-night sessions. The band would take things a little easier this time. In 1994, they'd been excited at the prospect of releasing an album, and had rushed through the process as quickly as possible. Having now found a sizable fan base, they were able to take a little longer over the second album. Once again, Terry Date would be the producer. The same DJ, Frank Delgado, also appeared, adding scratching and beats to 4 songs on the album. Frank was a well-known figure on the underground hip-hop scene, having collaborated with a number of stars of the genre. His alliance with the Deftones brought him his greatest recognition, increasing his standing with both the metal and the hip-hop fans. By the end of the sessions, Frank had become such a valuable companion that he was asked to join the band permanently. The Deftones' second album was called Around the Fur. Media speculation suggested the title had sexual implications, but Chino disagreed. Around the Fur referred to the side of show business that you don't see. All you see is the fur and the glamour, but the seedy side usually remains hidden. Lyrically, the album dealt with similar themes to Adrenaline. Chino's songs still reflected his anger with the world and the flaws of society. His songwriting had improved considerably, and he was well on the way towards developing a unique and individual talent. Adrenaline was a respectable debut, but Around the Fur was a better album. The Deftones' sound had progressed even further, becoming a mix of pile-driving riffs and dark ambient interludes, inspired by the British goth movement of the 80s. The band's characteristic sense of melody was still there, with tracks like My Own Summer, Shove It, managing to graft a pop sensibility onto their hard-edge sound. My Own Summer was also their first hit single, receiving heavy airplay on American radio stations. The single's success was aided by the somewhat creepy accompanying video, which featured the band playing in a series of ice floes and floating cages surrounded by swimming sharks. Aside from the initial single, the album's standout tracks included Shut Up and Drive, Far Away, and MX. The former had a hypnotic, almost trance-like quality, and was easily amongst their most mellow songs so far. MX was one of the Deftones' only songs to feature a female vocalist. Chino wanted to trade lines with a woman, presenting different perspectives. He was expressing his love of material culture and having fun, and the woman was criticising him for his callous attitude. Unfortunately, there were no female singers in the studio at that point, so Chino was forced to ask Anna Lynn, Abe Cunningham's wife, to step in and play the part. Anna Lynn was not keen on this idea at all, and steadfastly refused, but Chino's begging won her over, and she agreed to record the parts. For someone who isn't a professional singer, Anna Lynn made an impressive recording debut. Around the Fur was a reasonable success. By the end of 1997, it had sold approximately 400,000 copies, twice as much as its predecessor, and it showed no signs of slowing down. With the release of the Deftones' third album, sales of Around the Fur would rocket, easily hitting the platinum mark. With their fame slowly growing, the Deftones were also in demand in other areas. Their friendship with Korn resulted in Chino adding vocals to Life is Peachy from their multi-platinum album of the same name. Somewhat bizarrely, the band were also featured on a Skinny Puppy tribute and remix album. Skinny Puppy are one of the original industrial acts and a great influence on Nine Inch Nails. The presence of the Deftones on their tribute album was therefore something of a mystery, and their cover version is one of the more forgettable moments of their career. The Deftones also contributed songs to 2 soundtrack albums. They made their first movie appearance in The Crow 2: City of Angels as the band playing in the club during Day of the Dead festival, and a new song, Teething, was written for the soundtrack. Although the film was not a great success, the album had some very fine moments. Old friends Korn contributed a song, as did Filter, Bush and Iggy Pop. The Deftones track isn't their best, but it stands head and shoulders above the ill-advised and mediocre cover versions handed in by Hole and White Zombie. Less well publicised was their appearance on the Escape to LA soundtrack. Here they were in good company, with the album being split between industrial acts such as Ministry and Stabbing Westward, and 90s metal bands like Tool and White Zombie. Even in such illustrious company, the Deftones track Can't Even Breathe stands out as one of the best songs on the album. With Around the Fur selling well on both sides of the Atlantic, it was once again necessary to begin a lengthy round of touring and promotional duties. The next 2 years would see the Deftones' popularity grow beyond their wildest dreams.
But I know when I'm on stage, that's where I get to go and I can groove to music and have a good time. And I'm up there just having fun, I'm not worrying about, anything. I'm up there just being another part of me, you know what I mean?
The Deftones' next tour was termed the World Annihilation Tour. It was designed to reach all 4 corners of the globe, and the band made strict rules about how the tour would be conducted. This time around, the Deftones would be the headlining act, even if that meant turning down opportunities to play to larger audiences. They were offered the support slot with Korn, who were by now one of the most popular metal bands in the world, but they turned it down. From now on, they would play on their own terms. The World Annihilation Tour was incredibly successful. The Deftones were making headlines in all of the rock newspapers and magazines, as critics speculated about the band's future. Others were not so positive, again likening them to Korn and suggesting they were merely the first in a long line of pale rip-off bands. This kind of criticism annoyed the Deftones. Both bands had been in existence for a similar length of time, and it was simply fate that had allowed Korn to enter the spotlight before them. There were a handful of unfortunate incidents on the road, and the European leg of the tour in particular was dogged with bad luck. After a show in Germany, the band discovered that thieves had raided their tour bus and stripped everything from it. This included a couple of guitars that Stephen kept on the bus, as well as a large amount of home video footage that was due to be edited and made into a tour diary video, intended for release the following year. They were now left with just the clothes that they were wearing after the show. Worse still, all their personal belongings had also disappeared, including a number of letters from friends and family members. With the help of their management and the local police, they were able to replace most of the essential goods and get back on the road, as they were determined not to hold up the tour. A few days later, bad luck struck again. Travelling from Oslo, the capital of Norway, to Stockholm in Sweden is a 10-hour journey, and not always a safe one in the freezing cold of February. Unfortunately, the Deftones tour bus broke down in the middle of nowhere sometime after midnight. They tried to arrange replacement transport, but in the middle of the night in ferocious weather conditions, this wasn't an easy task. Eventually, another bus was sent, and the band transferred their belongings into the new vehicle. By this time, they were cold and frustrated, having been sat shivering in the old bus for several hours. Some of the incidents were less depressing, however. During a show in California, Chino launched himself into the crowd as he had done many times over the years, expecting the audience to carry him back to the safety of the stage. This is what usually happened, but not this time.